I stayed silent and looked at the large figure in front of my eyes. Looking back, he was maybe only around 6 feet, but to my young mind, he was gigantic. Welcome, horror buffs, to your ultimate destination for a heavy dose of bone-chilling encounters that will make your heart race and skin crawl uncontrollably. Are you ready for an intense rush of fear and thrill like never before? Then let's dive straight into the stories. The story was posted by spoopy_Reddit on r/Nosleep. An unjust consequence. When I was a kid, I used to walk among the trees in the forest behind my house whenever I got bored, or whenever I felt the urge to. And as a result, I found a large assortment of things, ones that wouldn't really matter to most people, but to me, they did. Old bottle caps, dirty rings, the type of things you might accidentally step on when hiking through a thoroughly walked trail. As I said, things that wouldn't warrant a second thought from the average person. Sometimes I would bring my metal detector out into the forest to aid in my search for how I saw them, the artifacts of careless people's dropped pieces of history. Now that you understand what I was doing out there, I can give you the rest of the story, although I'm not necessarily sure it's something you want to hear. On one of my excursions into the forest, which was exceedingly deep to a young man, I found a small piece of scrap metal with a large N carved into it, which excited me because that just so happened to be the first initial of my name. What was weird, though, was the fact that it didn't seem to be a cutoff point for a larger sign, unless the letters on said sign had been set extreme lengths apart from each other. As I looked around onto the soft dirt ground, I noticed small shavings of steel spread patternlessly around below my feet, as if the inscription had been made after the hunk of metal had been dropped off in the woods. Although this would be odd to any individual with critical thinking developed to an at least semi-passable capacity, it wasn't to me, which can be excused by the fact that I was young, although there are many times I wish that I had just walked away. Excitedly, I picked up the sheet of metal, but when I did, I felt a sharp prick in the palm of my hand and yanked it back suddenly. At first it didn't hurt, not after the initial shock of the small injury, but when I pulled my hand towards my line of sight only to see blood dripping down from a small and strangely triangular-shaped wound in my hand, I began to cry. For some odd reason, I felt compelled to keep the strange sheet of metal with me, so I hucked it up in between my arm and my stomach and ran the 2 minutes back to my house. When I got home, I was immediately greeted by my mother, whose warm expression quickly changed to one of confusion and concern, as her eyes shifted from the metal sheet to my teary-eyed face and disturbed demeanor. "Geez, Nate, what happened to you?" she asked. Her voice was the comforting type, and it calmed me down a little bit, but didn't distract me from my bleeding hand. I managed to muster up the ability to explain to her what happened without my voice completely breaking again through my tears, and she seemed just as confused as I was when I first found the metal sheet. "That's weird. And it didn't cut you again when you were carrying it back?" she asked, and I gave her a quick nod to say no. We communicated back and forth for a little while, but eventually the conversation ended, and the metal sheet was tossed in the trash, although I protested against it in hopes I could hang it on my door as a cool decoration. The next night, I was lying in bed, asking myself stupid questions that genuinely seemed reasonable to me, such as, if I attached a fan to my head and turned it on, would I fly like a helicopter? I continued into my deep philosophical search for another 10 minutes before I heard something strange. A beeping sound was coming from underneath the very blanket I rested under. I threw my blanket up to try and find the source of the beeping, and was perplexed to see a small red light going on and off inside my hand, just barely visible through the flesh. That perplexion quickly turned into terror as I remembered the metal sheet and the strange triangular wound. I raised my hand up to my face and looked at it closer. The red light was small but very noticeable in the dark. I laid there, sweating lightly and staring intently at my hand, which was now beeping red, providing little to no light in the pitch-black room I slept in. I decided that I would ignore it that night and go to my mom about it in the morning. With the decision made, I threw my blanket back over my body and tried my hardest to sleep, until I heard a burly voice come from beside me. "Hello, Nathan," it said, and my head snapped to the right to catch a glimpse of the man speaking to me. I stayed silent and looked at the large figure in front of my eyes. Looking back, he was maybe only around 6 feet, but to my young mind, he was gigantic. I started to cry, and the man continued to stand over me. "Don't worry, Sonny, it'll all be over soon," he replied, and placed his hand on the top of my head, which caused me to immediately pull back. After that, the man just stood there, staring at me as I slept. After a few hours, he pulled a small scalpel out of his pocket and made a small incision in my hand, then pulled out a small beeping piece of metal. At this, I became so frightened, I passed out, my body not knowing what to do in the situation it was presented with. The next morning, I woke up in a daze, confused as to whether or not I had really experienced what had happened to me the night before. But my suspicions were confirmed when I looked at my hand to see stitches running down the top of my backhand and nearly reaching my wrist bone. I walked out of my room to find my mother, but she wasn't in the house. I went to every room and checked it twice, making double sure that my mom wasn't in them, all the while calling out for her. Suddenly, as I made my final round to the bathroom, I heard the door that connected my house to my garage swing open. "Mom?" I loudly spoke into the area of the house I heard it in. "Yes, sweetie, I'm home," she responded. "Where were you?" "I was really scared. My hand is..." I spoke, but was cut off by my mother's voice. "I know, honey. I know. I got it all sorted out. The man who hurt you won't come back anymore," she said. "How did you know about..." I was again cut off by my mom. "I saw him leaving our house last night and I called the police to come and get him," she said, and made a nabbing motion with her hands, like a crocodile's jaw snapping down onto its prey. I looked over at the stitches on my hand again and shuddered at the sight of them. "Thank you, Mom," I said, and went over to her to get a hug. The next night I laid again in my bed, my eyes looking over the figures made shapeless by the void of the darkness, trying to connect shapes that I saw to what they were when the lights were on. As I looked over the dark landscape of my room, I saw a shape I hadn't seen before the lights disappeared, the figure of a large man, and a sharp object extending from his darkened hand. I screamed and the figure quickly began to move toward my window, then throwing it open with ease. Just as my mom ran into the room, the man jumped from the window and into the cool night. I wondered if perhaps I deserved this. As a consequence for stealing the man's sheet of iron, I don't know what drove me to think that. Perhaps it was just my underdeveloped mind trying to reason with the trauma of an unknown man breaking into my house twice, once to cut me open, and the other to do God knows what. I never heard or saw anything relating to the strange man again, or at least not up until recently, when I read an article that was printed in a local newspaper. "Man terrorizes family" was scrawled across the top of the paper in large black letters. In Hathaway just this evening, a man was arrested after the prolonged stalking of a family of 4 that lived peacefully in the town. The man has been identified as John Ira Jr., and during a recent court meeting, it was revealed that he had been accused of and successfully convicted of stalking in the past, but had escaped the small county prison he was held in within the first night of being kept there. The article read, I gazed at the article for just a few more moments before I put it down onto my coffee table and walked away, letting it slip my mind once again. Just a few days ago, an article appeared on my phone notifications, a recommendation from a service I had been meaning to cancel my subscription for. Missing boy linked to missing convicted stalker from Jabot County. It read, and To the side of the text was a full-quality, although now more aged picture of the face of the man who I had only seen from the limited visibility of a dark room illuminated very dimly by the moon when I was just a child. I wrote a revenge article against my friend's murderer. They came for me next. What is an appropriate reaction to grief? The only thing I wanted when it happened was for the responsible to pay for their actions. A raging fire burnt me from the inside day in and day out, and I wished for that same fire to stir up everyone in our small world, because I believe in the power of unity, especially if we have to put an end to evil. May 1968. The first case of what would much later be known as the Dice murders was reported. A man has been found in his own house, burnt to death with acid. Signs of struggles were evident, even though there were no indication of forced entry in the premises. Carefully placed next to the body was a white dice on which the face with 2 dots was painted in black. February 1971. The second case was reported in another town. A woman was found in her office as she was working late, electrocuted to death, but the source could not be identified. Next to the body, there was a white dice on which the face with 3 dots was painted in black. September 1977. The third case, similar to the first one, with an unidentified victim burnt with acid and a white dice with the 2 dots face painted in black. November 1985. The fourth case with a young victim found with not a single drop of blood remaining in the body. A white dice with the 5 dots face painted in black was found next to the body. March 1986. The fourth case with an old man found dead in his bed, with his skin turned green and covered with ulcers, as a putrid smell emanated from the body. A white dice with the 1 dot face painted in black was found next to the victim. April 1990. My friend and fellow journalist were given the same treatment as the fourth victim from November 1985. Since, I literally freeze or spiral out of control at the mere sight of a dice or any big representation of the number 5, like on a price tag or a sport jersey, for example. My employer and colleagues knew about the negative effects that loss had on me, yet maybe in compassion and to help me cope, they let me write the article that made me the next target. October 1995 at 11:34 p.m. After loathing the entire year because of the number 5, I was anticipating the next one with a lot of hope because of the progress made in science. I had a feeling that everything would be in place for the responsible of those murders to finally be brought to justice. Before going home, I was just finishing reviewing a few articles written by the new recruits when suddenly, "Good evening, Regina." A male, smooth and soothing voice resounded from my right. I jumped in surprise and left my chair immediately when I saw that my couch was then occupied by 3 people while a few others stood all around. They were 6 in total, all dressed in black with coats that had numbers written in white on the left side of the chest, going from 1 to 6. They all looked pale and otherworldly, giving the feeling that they were from another era but just found themselves at the wrong place and the wrong time. However, I was the one in a very dire situation. Who are you? How did you? I attempted speaking, outnumbered and overwhelmed by fear. "You can call me One." The owner of the soothing voice spoke again. Of course, he wore the coat with the number 1 on the chest. He was tall, lanky, and looked sick and frail. And as you can probably see for yourself, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We prefer to be referred as the Dice family, instead of the Dice killer like you always do in your articles, one said, introducing them all. What? That was the only thing I could muster, dominated by their fearful presence. "Regina, I'm afraid that we have matters to settle after the horrendous article you wrote about us. We usually do not go for the personal angle, but immediate action is required in this case to restore the family's honor." One spoke, pulling a dice from his pocket. "All that rage and hate in each and every word in your article. Because of what? Your friend? 2 spoke, with her female and calm voice that was reminiscent of a loving mother, tender voice and tone. Please understand her too, I would be equally angry if I were her. Who wouldn't want to keep such meal for oneself? Your friend tasted utterly delicious, exquisite. 5 spoke, her mocking and taunting smile revealing sharp white teeth. Enough of the pleasantries. Please, 1, roll the dice. I have a feeling that tonight is my turn. Finally, my greatness will be revealed once again, said 6, who apparently was the youngest, and with his eyes beaming with excitement. As soon as 1 threw the dice in the air, I screamed and ran to the door. 3 rapidly stood in the way with an unbelievable speed. I froze, then looked at 1 catching the dice, before opening his hand and announcing the number like the lucky winner of some very sick game. Number 3, 1 calmly said. What? No, this can't be, 6 protested. This dice has to be faulty. I demand justice. Let me roll the dice, he added. Please have some decorum and tact, 6, 3 retorted, speaking for the first time. 4, here is in the same situation in case your memory is faulty, he added. Nonsense. This one is the 544th. Why am I shunned so often? 6 asked. Maybe because you don't leave much behind, 5 replied. Enough. Please, make it fast. We've been here for far too long, 1 said. I have to tell you the shocking truth, Regina. It will hurt, 3 revealed, extending his strong and muscular arms in my direction. The moment he touched me, I was paralyzed and then became stiff. I then started convulsing as a deadly number of volts made its way through my entire body until I lost consciousness. I woke up several days later in a hospital bed. There is no indication on how I survived. According to the medical staff, I have just been revived in time after being found unconscious. When I mentioned the 6 killers, nobody believed that they were present in the building. The reasons are that it is very difficult for a group of 6 people to move so discreetly, and also, I was accused of being so obsessed with the dice murders to the point of staging an encounter with the responsible. A white dice with the 3 dots, face painted in black, was found next to me, and I know that I did not manufacture it myself. The authorities let me keep it since they believed that it is fake. I lost any credibility as a journalist, along with the career I'd worked for. Maybe this is what 3 meant when he said that it will hurt. Every day, every single day since that time, I think about my end, while the murders, even though covered up, continue to occur. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more thrilling horror stories like these. Also, share your thoughts on the story in the comments section below. If you want me to feature your own story on this channel, you are most welcome. Send your story to the email provided in the description below.